Hey guys, James from Kartz-N-Fartz. Want to show you what I'm getting ready to accomplish because I hadn't found any other videos. How to install a 70 volt eco battery into a club car precedent. So obviously if you're watching this video, you should know you need to have the Navitas motor because a regular controller motor setup will not handle that 70 volts. But I couldn't find any videos on how to install it, so I'm just going to kind of tackle this myself. I've got it all stripped down right now just for cleaning, and I've got the 6-inch lift on there right now. But this video is going to basically be about installing the battery. So I started doing a few things, and I said, you know what? I couldn't find a video. Maybe you guys could appreciate a video. So once I got all the batteries out of the way, I had my factory charging port. I've already removed it and installed the new one. I was not going to remove it for this video, but it's pretty simple. It goes through this hole right here on this back plate cover, and all this is plugged into your run toe switch, your factory solenoid, and your controller, which all that stuff comes off. If you need to know how to install a Navitas motor, there's plenty of good videos out there. But this one basically is going to focus on that big battery right there. So anyway, so once I got that out the way, I realized this harness has to go underneath the battery. So right here, this is a 2016 Club Car Precedent. I have cut that loose. The tool that I decided to use to cut it loose, and I picked it up at Lowe's, this little cutting tool right here, but it works really good. Little 20 volt, so I notched it out. And I also, this is where your factory harness zip ties to. I had to cut that out. So very simple. You just hold it flat there. This tool is worth its weight in gold. So I cut that loose and took that section out. Now I've already had that battery in here one time, and I said, you know what, before I go any further, I'm gonna back it up and make this video. Now the kit does come with these spacer blocks with little J-hooks. This is unlike the through-hole design for the 51 volt setup or 48 volt setup. And this will go on your outside rods right there. So once you get your old charging port out of the way, your new one, the Eco provides in there, you'll have plenty enough room to plug it up. Put these spacer blocks here. And then when I get to the other side, this other spacer block will go, so you've got two different areas. On the outside one, that's where they're going to go. And I loosely laid these in there. I didn't have to cut anything else out. I did cut this out initially because I've been cutting this little notch out, which looks very similar to this, for my 51 volt, but you don't have to cut that out. But anyway, I cut it out before I even got started, but don't worry about that. So put those two spacer blocks in there. Once you lay the battery in there, you're gonna notice you've got 3 different holes to set it in. And what I found worked best was to shift it as far forward as possible, so you'll have the maximum room clearance to operate that run toe switch. So let's get the battery in there, and we'll go on from there. Okay guys, one other thing that I did do is right here where the main harness goes underneath this cover for the computer, I did move this harness out the way, and I took a hole saw and I kind of made myself an access port. Remember, that battery is going to be coming on top of the brackets, which is like this. So it's going to sit about the same height as this up off the floor, but that needed to be below this level. So from the factory, it kind of comes over like this, but I had to cut that out. So I just went up just a little bit, probably about right here, there, and so the top end of it was out, so I could slide that down. Before you lay the battery down there, if you're going to install a bucket harness, which I am, I'm gonna need to lay out my bucket harness, because if you remember, it normally goes between the batteries right there in the center. But I'm gonna go ahead and lay the bucket harness and start running some other wires up to the dash, and we'll join in there. All right, guys, now we're ready to move on to the dash. I've already cut a hole in the dash plate, and the size of that is 2 3/64 or 52 millimeter. And once you take that off, you can see it's real simple. It's got 2 7mm bolts that kind of hold that little U-bracket to hold the gauge in. And I snug it, but also snug a little bit where I can twist it. I'm a little OCD, so I want to make sure it's straight. And from this video, I'm looking at the camera lens. It doesn't look like it's straight, but I promise you it's straight. So once I did that, I've got my harness, my little, I guess part of my bucket harness in there. There's also a relay. I am going to put an ultimate light kit on this with the turn signals and brake lights. I've already got the relay and the timer and the plunger for the brake lights in there. So anyway, now alongside the floor, I've got 3 wires that I used in this channel. I like to use the duct tape there to kind of hold it in place so it doesn't bulge up through the floor mat. And I think of those 3 wires, one is my bucket harness. The other wire is going to be my on-the-fly programmer for my Navitas kit. And then the other wire is the one that's going to plug in the back of your gauge. You can see that there's an 8-pin and a 4-pin. And if I get out the gauge, you can see it's got an 8-pin up top and a 4-pin underneath those wires right there. So I tried to size it up where I wouldn't have too much to tuck inside of there. There is some room in there where you could tuck it, but try not to put too much. It's going to be a whole lot easier to tuck it under the battery than behind the dash. Now, another thing that I did was on your voltage reducer. It's going to come with this wire right here. Again, I'm going to straighten all that out. So that wire that comes up there, I used it right alongside the channel for the factory harness, and it has this end on there. And this is a trigger wire for your voltage reducer. So I've used this type of voltage reducer on the early style eco batteries, and this one's I'm sure is going to work the same way, but it's really cool. So when you hit your ignition switch, it cuts off your voltage reducer. So that is a trigger wire. That wire will go to your blue wire. So I guess in lack of better ways to explain it, the green wire is going to have constant 48 volts when your run tow switch is on, and when you hit your key, it's going to energize this blue wire, which is going to trigger this wire, and it's going to cut on your voltage reducer. So I've got a connector. I bought some of these on Amazon. So this is going to make it really easy. So I'm actually going to cut that end off, that little round terminal. I'm going to crimp this on there. So when I do put it on the terminal there for your ignition switch, I can plug in the blue wire. So that's going to make a neat install. Like I said, I've done it before. It works for me. So hopefully it'll work for you. And I just dropped it, but I'll pick that up. So hopefully next time I zoom in on the video, you'll see the dash installed. And then my next project is going to be to work on all this. And I think earlier I mentioned about cutting that hole. That's so your harness can actually fit underneath there. So once we get my cables, I hope I should get those in the next day or two. There's my Navitas controller and my heavy duty solenoid. All that stuff is going to fit fine right there behind there. So anyway, oh, and since I've had the last video, I have installed the wires. There's a harness for your speed sensor, and I guess there's a thermo sensor or something that goes to there. And I've got all my wires just nicely coiled up. They'll come in through the bottom and they'll bolt up to my controller. But again, this is not about the Navitas. This is basically about getting that big old sucker inside of this battery tray. So, all right, so I'll click into this in a day or two when I get my cables, and we'll go from there. Hopefully I'll be able to show you with the dash installed. All right, guys, got another little step done. So there's a picture of what the dash is going to look like installed. I did drill a little tiny hole underneath here, and then I drilled 2 holes and put a zip tied it from the inside. So just kind of neaten things up. So all the wires are tucked in. Now on my battery tray, so this is what I've decided to do. I decided to mount my charger flat on the bottom, and let me tell you why. So initially I wanted to mount it vertically right here on the side, but I started thinking, if I put a bolt and a nut on the back side, I'd have to pull the body off in case I had a problem with the charger. So me being a mechanic, I just decided to mount it flush down there. It's going to be a little bit of a tight fit because this bracket is going to be pushed all the way up against it, or real close to it. I mean, really close to it, but I think it's going to be fine. I did mount my voltage reducer on the other side. No reason to stack everything over here on top of each other. And I ran my wires where it's going to be below the bracket kit here. I started to run this wire. There's a hole in the side of the bracket, if you can see, where you can move it through. Plenty of room for your J-hook to come up through. And I started to run that through there, but it does have 2 fuses. I hope I never blow them, but if I do, I want to be able to access them. So the wire for the trigger, where all these wires go right in through here, you can see the yellow, orange, red, black, and another thin black. All that goes through this main harness. Well, what I did do is all those wires came out on the end here. I'm gonna tape that around. But what I did was I just took the tape from the end. The trigger wire also came out of this, and I backed it up to about a halfway point. And the reason for that is in case later I want to add a radio or something else that runs, 12 volts accessory on there, maybe some driving lights or roof lights or whatever. What I'll be able to do is once this battery is installed and is flat, I'll be able to tug the wire from this corner and access another, a power source or power point from there. Because as neat as those connectors are, there's no way to really connect into them without it looking like a butcher job. So trying to keep this thing neat looking. What I did decide to try to do is, and once I get the battery in here, you'll see whether it works or not. But all these wires are going to be below this harness. Again, apologize for my amateur videography skills, but I'm doing this with one hand and no tripod. So I'm gonna come through that hole also. So when I mount this, all this stuff here is gonna be underneath the battery. The only big wires you're gonna be able to see are gonna be the power wire and the connection wire that goes to your receptacle there. But coming up the side there, I'm gonna have my main positive and negative for my battery for the, I believe that wire there is from your battery charger. This small one here, these 2 small ones, that's going to be for your voltage reducer. And then the third wires are going to be your main positive and negative, which are going to come out of here. And as I started looking at the video, by mounting these brackets here, you may be able to pull this harness off to the side here and come in. But anyway, it was super simple to cut, so I'm leaving it there. All these wires here, I did zip tie them. They're going to lay flat. And if you look at how tall that is, I mean, you've got plenty of room. So it should not be smacking it down or mashing on it. This one here had to be cut. There's no way around that. And so, anyway, next time I chime in on a video, that big old fat battery over there should be placed inside of this cart, and we'll go from there. All right, guys, I got my cables in. So kind of already mocked it up. So here's my positive cable that's coming down. It's going to go down beyond that little half circle cutout there that I cut out. And so I wrapped the end of it with some red heat shrink, so I know that's my positive. My negative cable comes up here and it goes to my B minus plug, or actually B plus plug, but anyway. That's my negative. And so I took some advice from some of the guys on Golf Cart Modified, give them a little shout out, for my cutout. So once I place this plate down flat, I just cut out a little small hole. I zip tied, I cut some holes down here on the bottom of these tabs to where I can zip tie it, because It is a whole lot of cable and a whole lot of harness and a whole lot of solenoid to try to pack behind this cover, which is in its factory position. So we're just going to use the zip ties. It's going to set out about another 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/2 inch. It's going to make it a whole lot simpler. So anyway, let me get that mounted up and I'll chime back in. Okay guys, you can see that I've got the T40 bolt right there secured. And so this is set out maybe a 1/4 inch, but my zip ties are holding it in tight. I've got plenty of room, not a whole lot of hole for any kind of moisture or water or anything to get into, but I've got my wiring harness, my thermo sensor, my on-the-fly programmer, my main wiring harness, all that stuff is plugged in, and there's no obstruction or tight fit on that. So you can see that I've got my Navitas motor mounted, my wiring cables mounted, everything is snug. That's actually my tail light harness right there. So once I get the underbody on there, this harness will go right on top of it. So I'm getting ready to drop that bad boy in there and make sure my wires are covered up properly. Again, I'm leaving a little gap over here to mount my any type of 12-volt power supply. At this point, it's just going to be my headlights, tail lights. I am going to install an AM/FM Bluetooth radio, so I'll mount it there also. Okay guys, got the battery set in there. These wires right here are to my headlights and tail lights. And you can see I got my 12-volt reducer. All my wires are hidden underneath the battery, so that came across pretty nice. I got my rear underbody in place. Over here I've got my charger, and that did work out underneath this bracket. So I pulled up my cables for my, well, you got my cables for my controller, positive and negative cables, and then you got the cables for the battery charger, the wires for the voltage reducer, and then my wire for my on-the-fly programmer. So I got it sitting in place. Right now we're looking at about a 50% charge. I'm gonna let it charge overnight. Shouldn't take really that long, to be honest with you. I'm gonna go ahead and flip my run tow switch down to tow. And in the morning, we're gonna start putting the body on this thing and let you see what it's gonna look like, and then we'll do some test driving. All right guys, I wanna show you something you're gonna have to watch out for. So since you do lower this harness all the way down to the floor, hopefully it will focus into there. It's going to be underneath the battery. What it does, it brings your forward reverse switch wires down lower. So just be sure you've got a little bit of extra flexibility. This harness will pull up. So I've got mine pulled up about 1 inch. And that way when I put the body on, I'll be able to reach these wires or possibly service it down the road if you ever need a forward reverse switch. So that's just a little tip to make sure you've got enough extra wire to connect to that switch without having to put extension wires on there. Okay guys, that's the end of the install video. So again, this was about the 70-volt battery because there was no videos for me to find out there, but did get some pointers from the guys over at Eco Battery, which is right here in West Columbia, South Carolina. But me being a relatively new Eco Battery dealer, I've done about 10 installs so far. This is the first 70-volt. Very impressed. I took it for a quick little ride earlier today, and it got up to 37 miles an hour in no time. I mean, it really felt like a big block Chevrolet on nitrous. I mean, so I can't wait to get a little bit of tuning, and the guys over at Eco Battery is going to help me do some tuning on this Navitas kit. I've also used some of these Eco Battery, the 105s, with some Plum Quick motors, and very impressed with that. So you won't have to spend quite as much money as the Navitas. But, you know, for a DC cart, I think it's a pretty good combination. So, again, you know, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. That's okay. I got thick skin. If you see something I did wrong, you know, let me know. Let me know. I'm learning this stuff just like a lot of you guys are. And a big thanks to those guys that have already put videos out there on some of the how-to stuff, because I learned a lot by watching that stuff on YouTube also. So If you're interested in any inventory I may have for sale, or maybe even an eco battery, my company is carolinamotors.net. I'm doing business as Kartz-N-Fartz for the golf cart side of it, but I'm located right here in Lexington, South Carolina. So again, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this helped out. Have a great day.